Good afternoon and welcome to our Brown Bag webinar on the SJS-funded Maryland Court Data Analysis Project. I would like to thank the Bureau of Justice Statistics for their support, which make webinars like this possible. Today we are joined by Jeffrey Zubach, the Director of Research, Analysis, and Evaluation, and Brianna Irwin, an MSAC analyst with the Maryland Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy. The Maryland Court Data Analysis Project is an interactive data dashboard examining court data for criminal charges filed in Maryland District and Circuit Courts between 2001 and 2021. This dashboard is designed to increase data transparency, display trends in case outcomes, and provide a searchable format allowing users to explore and compare trends in prosecution, convictions, and sentencing across a variety of metrics, including jurisdiction, demographics, and filing and disposition dates. The dashboards provide an intuitive way to search for cases over a wide range of crime categories and search features. The dashboards include interactive analysis pages, one-pagers presenting findings of a selected snapshot, a user's guide, methodological information, and links to additional resources available through other agencies. With that, I will turn things over to Jeffrey and Brianna.
Thanks, Jason. I'm going to try to do a quick, maybe 10 to 12 minute overview of the project, and then I'm sure you all really want to dive deep into the dashboard, and Brianna's been the mastermind behind all of that. So I just want to try to do a little more high level of how this project kind of got started, how it came to be, what we were trying to accomplish with it, and then we can dive in. But before we go too much further, I do want to get a couple poll questions from the panel just to try to learn more about the quality of the court data that you have in your particular state. So I do have this Slido up. So we're probably going to give about 30 seconds for each question. So if you could just use the QR code there on your phones, you can answer this question. But the first question is, does your state have a unified court records management system? I know while we were in the middle of doing this project, it became a unified system. But while Brianna was doing her analysis of data, she really had to go through a bunch of different court data sets and merge them together. So we'll give this a little time to kind of for people to respond. So it sounds like so far, most states have a unified court records management system, which is good. Okay, we got one no in there, a couple no's. We'll let this go on a little longer. Okay, I'll go to the next one here. The next question is, oh, I guess I have to go to the next one. All right, court data for research purposes is easily accessible in my state. You can kind of rate, I guess how easy it is to get the quality, all of that.
Like so. There was a guy in Colorado, an FBI agent.
Okay, so it looks like we got a mixture of strongly agree and strongly disagree. One of the reasons why we did this project in Maryland was because it was very hard to get court data. So but got a little bit of a mix. Okay, let's go to we'll go to the third question now. The third question is just more, does your SAC have any current or past projects analyzing court data? This is the first time that we've really taking a deep dive into court data in Maryland. All right, so for the most part, you are analyzing court data, so that's good to know. So this project, then you should have some, insight to see how your work might be, similar or different than the work that we're putting together. All right, I'm gonna move forward here. So a quick overview of our project. So Jason had already covered that we basically are doing an analysis of district and criminal court data over a 20-year period. This was an SJS funded project. Thankfully we did get a couple no-cost extensions to continue this just because of the amount of work that went into this. We did get this project approved for 3 years under the SJS project. And this is an interactive data dashboard. It's really intended for a wide variety of audiences, which is something that we can talk a little bit more about as we dive into it. But we really wanted to gear this dashboard towards the general public that don't really know anything about court outcomes. We also wanted it to be a tool for the judges to use themselves, or states' attorneys, legislatures, law enforcement, to really look at a variety of different trends. And we also are going to go a little more into a lot of the cleaning work that Brianna did, but it really could be a really great resource for Maryland and cleaning court records, because over the course of 20 years, you can imagine the quality of the poor quality of court data, or how court cases are entered or crimes are entered, and all of that's been standardized, and we can elaborate on that a little bit more. But that was kind of the quick overview of this project. This is something that we wanted to be clear up front, especially because we intend to make this dashboard publicly available in the next couple of weeks. We want to be very clear to the public as to what you can and can't do with it. This dashboard is meant to explore trends, make comparisons, filter the data across a variety of different options, which we'll show you. You can view all crimes associated with a case, but this dashboard was not meant to look up particular defendants, particular judges, particular parties involved in any case. This is just state record data. There's no federal data in here. It doesn't allow you to view anything above and beyond what you see on the dashboard, and there's no way to export the data. So this is just something we're very upfront, as this is going to be made publicly available, as to what our intentions are and what the public can and can't do with the data. This is just some of the sources. So we worked with a couple vendors. So we didn't actually get the data directly from the courts. We worked with a couple vendors we have a public facing Maryland Judiciary Case Search. We worked with a couple vendors that were able to scrape data directly from Judiciary Case Search. So initially we had 95 million rows of data to work with after removing various tabs. So we wanted to make sure we removed missing charge information. We only wanted to focus on criminal cases, so we removed transportation and natural resource statutes. Anything that was outside of that 20-year range, we found that any data prior to 2001 was a little bit spotty for some jurisdictions, so we wanted to try to work with a good 20 years of clean data. We also removed any district court cases that were forwarded to the circuit court. That way there was no duplication of cases that are being counted. And then we removed civil cases. So the remaining rows, I think we ended up with about 40 million rows of data, give or take. So our final pool of analysis over the 20-year period, we're looking at over 637,000 circuit court cases and nearly 2.5 million charges. And on the district court side, 1.85 million cases and over 3.6 million charges that you see laid out in the dashboard. Some of the data elements that we got, there's certainly more than this, but this is kind of a high-level overview. So we did get case numbers. We were able to differentiate between circuit court and district court across all 24 jurisdictions in Maryland. We got all charge numbers. So if someone was charged with 20 offenses in a particular case, you would be getting all 20 charges associated with that case. Dates became really important because we have a lot of formulas that track the length of time that it takes for cases to be completed, but you could track dates based on the date of the offense, the court issue date, and the disposition date. There was a variety of different charge description fields, which really had to be standardized. Same thing on the charge, statute, and code side. There were a lot of various dispositions that had to be recoded. And then there wasn't consistency across the board for some of our jurisdictions. We're missing demographics, plea information, sentence length, and bail amounts. Restitution was a piece of data that we've never had access to in Maryland before. And unfortunately, we only got restitution for one jurisdiction. So there wasn't a lot that we could do with that. This is just a snapshot. So something that was really unique while we were in the middle of this study, expungement laws took effect in May of 2022, which is very important for why we cut our data off at 2021. The reason was because a lot of that data disappeared due to expungement laws. So our data was scraped prior to expungements taking effect. So this is just a snapshot of what judiciary case search looked like in Maryland before expungement. So anything that you see here is pretty much data that we had access to except for identifiers. But you can see, all the charge information here. You can see the status, if there was a sentence length associated with it. So you can see that there's a lot of different charges here. So this is just a snapshot of what judiciary case search was. This is what judiciary case search looks like now. So you can see that there were charges 1 through 4 in here. Now charges 2, 3, and 4 are completely gone from the data now. That data is completely disappeared. It's expunged. So it's just kind of showing you why we cut off at 2021 and the value of this data, because if you were to search this data now in the courts, you're not going to have any cases that resulted in like something that was not prosecuted or not guilty. Is that data is just basically completely gone now. So that's just showing you a snapshot there. So what are some of the limitations of the data that we did get? We did mention some inconsistencies in data elements, in particular one jurisdiction, which just happens to be a very highly populated jurisdiction right on the DC border. They did not have a lot of information that other court data sets had. They didn't have plea information, demographics, sentencing information. We did find in a few of the smaller jurisdictions that there were some random gaps in data, like a 2 or 3 year period where there were only a few court records. And I think that that's just something due to the scraping tool that was used. We ended up not using identifiers for a variety of reasons since we were making this public, but we did try to use this data for some recidivism type research, and we just weren't able to do it with the lack of identifiers that we had. And we would love this to be in real time. We can elaborate a little more about how we hope to get more real-time data on this, but we did cut it off with 2021. One of the main reasons there being because of the expungement laws that took effect in Maryland. The data cleaning process. You can really appreciate the amount of work that Brianna put into this, but over a 20+ year period, there were over 236 unique combinations of charge description statutes and CJIS codes, which were standardized into roughly 3,800 different charge description statutes and titles. We also standardize that into 4 crime types and 30 crime categories, which just makes it a lot easier to search through. Again, you'll see all of this once we preview the dashboard. There were 25 different unique pleas, which were then standardized into 6 different categories. There were 129 unique dispositions, which we then had to determine whether or not those dispositions resulted in a prosecution, a conviction, and then we have 4 primary outcomes: guilty, not prosecuted, or pending. And then there were so many different columns where sentence length was included, and Brianna had to use a lot of formulas to really calculate the sentence length, accounting for time given and time suspended across 36 different columns across all of the different data sets. Here's just a few definitions that I think will be important. We lay out a lot of definitions in the dashboard, but for prosecution rates, we wanted to look at any case where at least one charged moved forward with a prosecution. On the conviction side, there could have been 20 charges associated with a case. As long as one of those charges resulted in a conviction, that's counted under case conviction. Sentence length, we used years for ours. And then we factored in suspended time. So if someone's given 25 years, 10 years suspended, we calculate that as 15 years. And then we also coded life sentences because there was no numeric value attached. We included life sentences as 60 years. And then we also include something where we factor in any sentence to incarceration. So we calculate that as any sentence of greater than 0 days. So even if they spent one day in jail, under a conviction, we're counting that as a sentence to incarceration. These are some of the main filters that could be applied on the dashboard, pretty much on every page. You can filter by the different dates, offense date, filing date, or disposition date. You can filter between all 24 counties. You can toggle between district court and circuit court. There's a variety of offense classifications, which we'll break down. You can look at felonies or misdemeanors. And then for our purposes, we also toggle between violent, if you're just interested in any crime of violence, if you're interested in any drug-related crimes, there's mainly your possessions or intent to distributes, any firearms-related crime. We just had those as different categories just because we thought that they'd be interesting to the public, and they kind of align with a lot of the goals of our SAA and reducing violent crime and firearm-related violence and things like that. Offense filters, you'll see it more in the dashboard, but you can filter the offense down to different categories and groups. You can also determine whether it's an actual offense or if it's attempted, conspiracy, or solicitation. Everything lines up to Maryland criminal statutes, which is really important for lawyers that want to review the data for different crime codes, or if legislation that would introduce new penalties for a particular statute. You can kind of see how the data aligns with that. CJIS codes are applied, when someone is arrested and fingerprinted. You can look at felonies and misdemeanors, and you can also you can search any offense, and you can look at all of the other crimes that are charged in conjunction with that offense. So we're just using assault first degree as an example here. But you look at assault first degree, you can see all of the offenses that are charged in conjunction with assault first degree, both more serious and more minor offenses across the board. Specific areas of analysis within our dashboard, we really have 5 main pages in our courts dashboard. One is more of a quick comparison page. The data can get very dense, so we wanted to have one page that has a little bit less customizable options and more what's the down and dirty. This will quickly get you to the trends that you're looking for. Then we have a general trends page that looks at more trends over time across a variety of different prosecutions and sentencing and demographic and plea metrics. Then we have one that focuses more on the prosecution side, whether the outcomes of each case, how many are moving forward, how does that compare by jurisdiction, how does the use of plea impact prosecution decisions. And then we have one that really tracks sentencing outcomes, what percentage of cases are being sentenced to incarceration, what's the average sentence length, how does that differ by race, by plea, all of that information. And then we have a page that really lets you dive into different offenses, and you can see the associated offenses that are charged in those cases. And then we have a separate dashboard where we basically, this really shows you could use this data for a variety of purposes. We had a completely different study where we wanted to look at court cases involving human trafficking, but you could really use this dashboard for any crime of interest, whether that's murder, if you wanted to look at, hate crimes, elder abuse, gang-related violations, anything like that. But this is just showing you an example of how you could kind of take the macro level court data and turn it into a micro level project, just looking at outcomes of particular cases. In this case, we focused on human trafficking. Some other things that we include in the dashboard, since there is a lot of information, we do have a user guide that comes with the dashboard that really navigates you through the different types of visuals and tooltips and filters and slicers. We show you again what you can and can't use the dashboard for. We have a methodology page that really gets into all of the data definitions, how you define different cases. That way the end user knows what they're looking at, how to interpret the data correctly. We also have an additional resources page. There's other dashboards in the state that have various court level data. It's not down to the level of detail that's provided in ours, but we do provide links to other dashboards that are used around the state. And then we did try to do more of one-pagers that looked at 5 years of data, just for people that they don't want to do any clicking of data. They just want to look at some various trends. So we broke those out as well. So we're going to get ready to dive into the dashboard, but what are the next steps with all of this? We do plan on making this live within the next few weeks. We have already shared this dashboard directly with the judiciary. We presented it to the prosecutors. The prosecutors love it because there's some legislation where they want prosecutors to basically submit this data, which is already included in the dashboard. We've presented it to the legislature. We've presented it to a lot of comms people, so it's gotten a lot of good feedback. So We're just putting the finishing touches on it, making it public. And we are actively trying to get more recent data from the courts now that they know that this exists. We've cleaned a lot of their data for them. So we're hoping that this kind of leads to a stronger partnership with the court's data, and then we can get this data more in real time. We still need to figure out what that expungement piece looks like, because we want to make sure that we're including the totality of all court cases and not just the expunged cases. So that might be a little hoop that we have to go through, but that's our intent. So we are going to leave time, hopefully about 10 to 15 minutes of questions at the end. So I would like to dive into the dashboard unless there's any immediate questions, but I'm sure you all want to see what the dashboard looks like.
Okay, so as Jeff mentioned, the dashboard that we've created is not currently on our website, but it will be going up soon in the next few weeks. So when this is available and you are able to visit the page, this is the first page that you're going to encounter. This is our landing page. It's our welcome page. It's providing an overview of the project, and it's giving kind of some of that information that you just received from Jeff, where it's describing what our purpose was, what each page is, and also provides navigation to different parts of the dashboard. So here we have 3 separate sections for navigation. We have our content areas. These are those 5 pages that Jeff talked about. We have our resources, the user guide, methodology, dashboard capabilities, and additionals. And we also have access to the one-pagers. The user guide and the methodology are available on every other page of the dashboard, and each of the one-pagers can be accessed from its corresponding content area. I'm going to go ahead and do a deeper dive on our quick comparison and associated offenses page, and give a briefer explanation for our other 3 content pages. So starting with our quick comparisons, every page has navigation at the top. So you're going to see these options up here. You're still able to access all the other pages. Every page has a reset button where, since we have many different filtering options, you can make any number of selections you'd like. And then if you click that reset button, it will return to this default of circuit court cases in the entirety of Maryland for the full time period of 2001 to 2021. This title that you see is interactive on each page, so any selection you make to the court system or the county or the time period will update with that selection. We then have various filters. So we have the year, court, and county. We have the type of offense. This is where, when Jeff mentioned in the PowerPoint that all the different charge information got broken down into about 3,800 different crimes, they were grouped into groups, which were grouped into categories, which are the 30 options you see here. And those categories come into these 4 different offense types. So we have CDS crimes, other crimes, person crimes, and property crimes. On this page, you can choose if you'd like to view data at the case level or the charge level. And you also have these filters for category. As we scroll down to get a look at the actual data on this page, we have some key metrics. So we have the number of cases, percent of cases prosecuted, percent convicted, percent sentenced to incarceration, and what the average sentence length was for at the case level in years. If you were to set this page to charges, you'd see all the same information, but specific to charges instead. Beneath this, you're able to choose which metric you're viewing of those 4 of those options with prosecution, conviction, incarceration, and sentence length. And we have different visuals that show that information. So you're able to compare across counties, across different offense groups. And again, these groups of offenses are within those categories you saw above. And I'm going to click on one to show you an example of how that all fits together. We have it by the filing year of the case and also by different defendant demographics. So this is race and gender. Jeff mentioned some limitations in our data. So there is one circuit court jurisdiction for which there is no defendant demographics, but for all the other 23 jurisdictions, we do have the information available. So I'm going to go ahead and select a category so you guys can see how this works. We're going to use assault as an example. That's just going to be the example across all pages that we look at today. So you'll see your key metrics I've just updated for any crimes of assault. You scroll down. We're now looking at different statistics here because of that selection. And the dashboard's getting ahead of me. So one thing that's really great about these interactive dashboards is that you can include tooltips on your visuals. So for this, anytime you hover over a different visual on this dashboard, you're going to see more information. If I hover here at Worcester County, which is the top prosecution rate for cases of assault, then you're going to see how many charges, how many cases, what the defendant demographics were at the charge and case level. And then at the bottom is a table that breaks out individual charges that fit within that category. If we look to the right at this case is prosecuted by offense group, and we hover over this life-threatening injury, excuse me, you're now seeing which specific charges are inside that life-threatening injury group. And that's the same for any piece of the visual you were to hover over, you're going to get that greater level of detail. And the information available here is present for any selection you make. So currently we're looking at the cases that were prosecuted. This is showing the percent of cases convicted. This is those sentenced to incarceration. And here is with the average sentence length. So you can see this is updating based on the selection you have, but it's still providing a comparison across jurisdictions or years or offense groups. And currently, as you see, we have assault selected. If we click reset all filters, this sets back up to looking at all of the circuit court cases, regardless of offense. Turning us over to our general trends page. So the general trends, prosecution outcomes, and sentencing outcomes, sorry, all look the same in terms of the format and the filters that are available on those pages. So you're still seeing, I apologize. You're still seeing the reset button up here at the top, and you have your title, which is interactive based on the selection of year, court system, or county. And at each of these pages, you're also going to have a box of instructions. So this box is going to provide more information about what information is on this page and also any limitations of the data. So this one is providing that regarding that one jurisdiction that does not have certain data points at the circuit court level, just to make sure that that is known to any user who comes to the dashboard. The filtering options here are those that Jeff described when going through the PowerPoint. So we have the specific offense where you can see into those 4 different groupings. You can see type, category, and groups. Or if we select something in here, you're going to see individual charge descriptions. Or you can choose to view based on completion status of the offense. We also have the statute information where you can either look at actual language used in statutes, or you can look at the abbreviated format where it lists out the article or which section of the law it is. If you see here, this AB, this is corresponding to alcoholic beverages. So they're all interrelated. And you can also view it by the CJIS code or the charge class.
We really wanted to make these as customizable as possible, depending upon who the target audience would be. So that's just why there's a variety of different options. We're really curious once this goes live, who's using it for what purpose and what ways they're like, what are the most common ways that they're searching for the offenses in here.
Yeah, and I think we're all excited to get feedback on the dashboard once it goes up on the website. And if any of you have feedback as we go through this, we'd love to hear what you have to say as well. For the violent crime and the drug or firearm related offenses, for each of these, you can either choose to view offenses that fit that specification of either violent, drug, or firearm related, or you can view any case that includes those kinds of crimes. So if you chose the case, like a violent case, you would see both these individual violent crimes in those cases, but you would also see anything that was not a violent crime that was charged in a case with a violent crime. And the same is true for the drug-related and the firearm-related. Before scrolling down into the data, I am going to go ahead and click on assault so we can see this as an example. Any selections you make to the filters on this page will display here just so you can keep track of any selections. If you ever accidentally select something, it will also be showing here. And then, of course, if you want to remove those selections, you can either choose to turn it off or you can hit the reset button at the top. But the data we have here are more of our general trends. So this is looking at overall across counties, what are we seeing with case outcomes? So we have prosecution, conviction, and incarceration rates. We have distribution across different counties of the state in this map. We have distribution across years of the project from 2001 to 2021. We also provide the defendant gender and race breakdowns. And at the bottom, we have a table that shows the top 25 most frequently charged offenses. Anytime you see a table like this, as we do include tables of the similar format across the different analysis pages, the blue data are specific to charge information and the green data are specific to case information. This is just a comparable format, so you're able to view how outcomes differ at the charge level or the case level, where sometimes you may see a high conviction rate at the case level, but the charge itself is being convicted or prosecuted in very infrequent occurrences. And that's something that you'll be able to explore more as you have any specific questions you might be looking for, or to just get a feel for general trends that are taking place in the state. I'm going to head over to our prosecution outcomes. Any selection you make to a filter on general trends, prosecution outcomes, or sentencing outcomes will maintain across for each of those pages. So since we selected assault on the previous page, that filter is still in place here. And any filtering options are identical. So I'm not going to go into detail with what's possible here, but I will scroll down so you guys can see the data. This card in the top left of cases and charges is consistent across pages in that that is where it is located. We again here have the prosecution rate, and now instead of a map showing the distribution of cases across the state, we're now showing a distribution of how prosecution rate varies across the state. Here, the yellow is used for lower rates and the blue is for higher rates, where when you see a more bold color, that's when it is a much higher or much lower value. We also provide a comparison by either race or gender, looking at the prosecution and conviction rate. So you're able to toggle between which demographic you'd like to view here. The rest of the information on this page is just getting at those outcomes. Anything you choose filter-wise will provide the information for the specific crime you're looking at. But in general, we're looking at outcomes of cases, outcomes of charges, how the use of plea differed when a case was being prosecuted or not prosecuted. And additionally, at the bottom, we have several different options for what you may want to be viewing. This table is looking at all offenses. And again, the blue is for charges and the green is for the case level outcomes. We also have it for just limited to the top 25. So right now, if you were to scroll, you're going to be seeing as many different assault crimes as exist within the category. And beneath these are looking at different rates of conviction or prosecution by the filing year or by the disposition year. We're able to view these trends as well. Turning to our sentencing outcomes page. Everything you see with sentencing data, any sentence length is in years. This is also set to have only assault showing based on the selection on the prior page. And again, all filtering options are consistent from the previous pages to this page as well. One thing to note here, and it is noted in the instructions at the top, when you're viewing the circuit court data, any cases from Prince George's County, that is that jurisdiction that we've mentioned that we did have a data limitation for, are missing from it since they do not have sentencing information. They're excluded from the page. So you will notice that the total number of cases and charges is lower on this page when you're viewing circuit court data than it is on the previous two pages. But we have here what percentage were sentenced to incarceration, the average sentence length at either the case level or the charge level, a breakdown of from filing to prosecution to conviction to sentencing, distribution across the state in terms of sentence length. If you were to hover over any of these counties, you're going to get more information. It's going to provide you both the case sentence length and the charge sentence length on average. The map itself is based on the case sentence length. And then we also have these three comparisons here with average sentence by race, plea, or gender. And hovering over any of the bars will also provide more information. So if we hovered here over unknown, you're going to see, sometimes it just takes a minute to load, the average sentence length for the case level, for the charge level, how many charges or cases are within that grouping, and also information about the average time between filing and disposition and from date of offense to filing. And that's the same information you're going to see on each of these different visuals. At the bottom of this page, we have this page's table. Again, blue for charges, green for cases. And here we have looking at percent that were sentenced and the average sentence length. And you have options to view either all offenses, only the top 25, those that are for violent crimes, or those that are firearm related. We additionally have this option here to view charges with a life sentence. This is only for the circuit court, as we did not have life sentences from our district court data. And that would show you only those cases in which that was charged, or that sentence was given. Okay. Turning to our last page here of associated offenses. So this is the page you're able to visit when you want to view how different crimes were charged alongside other crimes. The filters at the top are very similar to those of the quick comparison page, where you have year, court system, county, type of offense, and completion status. On this page, any choice of type of offense is going to impact your category and charge information, but it will not impact your visuals. So if we went ahead and selected that we wanted to look at person crime, it will change here, but it will not change the rest of the page. The only options that will impact the data you have displayed are going to be this offense category or the offense charge description. To continue with our example of assault, I'm going to scroll down so you guys can see the key metrics. There is a table at the bottom. We're going to get to that in just a moment, but we're going to click on assault. So this is not showing only assault. This is showing assault and anything charged alongside assault. So let's go ahead and click on assault first degree as an example to look at a very specific crime. This small circle, if you guys are able to see it, is just gone away there, and it's down here. That's the symbol it gives you when it shows that it's loading. So that's always a good sign. It's just sometimes it may take a little bit of time for the visual that you're looking at. So here we have our key metrics. So we have both the charge in blue and green for cases. We have the number that were filed, and this is looking at both assault first degree and any other crimes associated with it. So if you look down at our table, you're going to see that assault first degree was charged 76,717 times, while any other crime in those cases brings it out to about 450,000. What the prosecution, conviction rate, and incarceration rates were, as well as the sentence length, and again for the case level. Now down at this table is where we have the more interesting information related to the associated offenses. So the top line you see is the crime that you selected, assault first degree, and everything below it is in order of how many cases it co-occurs on any other crime that was charged when assault first degree was charged. So here we have assault second degree was the most frequent in cases, handgun use in a felony or violent crime, reckless endangerment, robbery. It's going to vary greatly. But you're also able to look at the prosecution and conviction rates of those individual offenses, as well as those cases when you know it also includes assault first degree. This last column here, that's actually with a yellow data bar, is going to show you what percent of cases they were co-occurring in. And I know you guys just got a little hint of that tooltip. So similar to the first page of this dashboard, if you were to hover over any row in this table, you are going to see more information for that crime. So here we're looking at when assault second degree, these were the defendant demographics for that charge. This is for the handgun use in a violent crime, and here for reckless endangerment. And that's available for everything on the table. Okay.
Very quickly, Bree, I want to certainly give time for questions. Just like a minute overview, just quickly show the user guide and the methodology page, because I know that I know that a lot of the SACs around the country are using dashboards, and we kind of want to show our way of really educating the users on complicated topics, like how they can view some things. So that way you can just kind of see we have a lot of screenshots and some things. We really try to take the guesswork out of it.
The user guide is just walking you through different features that are provided on each page of the dashboard, so that it may be instinctual to go to the page, but if you do find yourself with questions, you can refer to the user guide to get more information about what the instructions includes, what are these different filtering options and what they're providing to you. We do include other information about the visuals themselves and how you can best interact with them, as well as any additional features like tooltips and different buttons. For those who are not familiar with Power BI, you may not be aware of different things you can do as a user that are just a default option. So as an example, you can do a right click on a visual and show the data as a table. I can show that as an example, but this is walking you through the process of how to do that. If we did that, I can actually show you on our methodology page, so we can just go ahead and visit that one. This is our methodology. It's talking about our data source, our exclusion criteria, any limitations to the data. The definitions are those calculations we showed on the PowerPoint. We also have information about how each different entry from the court records was standardized for our purposes, and how we were identifying violent, drug, and firearm-related offenses. To show the example of showing data points as a table, let me see if I can do that here. Okay, so if you were to right-click on something like so, and it's now showing show as a table, this one isn't the best example as this data is already in a table format, but if you were to do this on a pie chart or a bar chart, you'd be getting the same outcome of having it show up as a table instead. Okay, and this just brings you back to the previous page you were on before that. Anything further, Jeff, from this dashboard?
For the sake of time, I guess we can dive into the human trafficking one real quick and then
Okay.
leave it open for questions, or if you want us to go back to a particular page, we can do that as well.
Awesome. You guys still see this okay?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So this is our human trafficking dashboard. This was a separate project that also included the use of the court records that we included in the court dashboard. In addition to the court data, we had, I believe it was 6 other data sources. So this is something that will be going on our website after the court dashboard comes out, and I recommend and highly encourage you to come check it out. It is something where we took a look at human trafficking as much as we were able to collect data for the state of Maryland. This looked at prosecution, it looked at law enforcement investigations, and it also looked at any victim information we were able to collect. For the purpose of just right now in this presentation, I'm only going to show you our prosecution data from our state charges. So let's go ahead and go over to there. We have 2 pages that are dedicated specifically to that data source. Again, we have navigation at the top of the dashboard. For this one, methodology is available here on the left, and we also have a reset button. We have similar filter options as was on the previous dashboard, where you can look at the different years displayed, court level, and county. We also have things for the differences in law, which is specific to human trafficking information, and different groupings based on the human trafficking crime. But here we're showing I would kind of describe it as the left side is an overall look at the state of Maryland, and the right side, this table here, is providing the same information as the left, but it's instead showing it in a comparable format across counties. So you have here the number of cases. First column in your table is the number of cases. You've got your prosecution rates and your average sentence length, which are also present in this table over here. We also provide conviction rates for those where cases were being convicted of specifically a human trafficking crime. And those are both present in this table as well. We also have conviction rates specific to prosecuted cases, as we do see that that is a much higher conviction rate than when looking at the full spectrum of cases. And at the bottom, we do provide a distribution of that across time, where the bars you see here are the number of cases and the line is the number of charges. Happy to return to this. Just in the interest of time, I am going to click to the next page, where the previous page was looking at a statewide and a by-county comparison. This one is looking at the charges. So here, anything you're seeing that is blue is a human trafficking crime. Anything that is yellow is a non-human trafficking crime. And we have 2 separate tables that break this out. So the top table is for human trafficking charges. The bottom is for non-human trafficking. And they're each providing outcomes at both the charge and case level. And the data here are interactive. So similar to the associated offenses on the court dashboard, any selection you make on a table here will impact the other table to show you only human trafficking or non-human trafficking offenses that co-occurred with that crime. So if we picked sexual solicitation of a minor, which was the most common human trafficking offense, you're going to see that the bottom table will update to only show you non-human trafficking crimes that took place in those cases. And we have a little processing circle. So now sex offense 3rd degree is our most common charge, followed by assault 2nd degree, and so on and so forth. That was a very brief explanation of this one. Again, happy to get further into it. Just want to provide time for questions.
Yeah, I think it just provides a really good example, knowing that this was a completely separate SJS project, but it really provides a way that you could take all that robust court data set and really narrow it down. I know, for any of you that are co-located, with the SAAs, all the victim service grants that go out, the amount of information, whether you're looking, I know we have a hate, we just got hate crimes funding like a couple years ago to give that out. So providing data on hate crimes, or we have, grants that we fund that disrupt gangs and criminal networks. So you could use this to look at gangs. You could look at this for any victim type crimes that you're looking for. Unfortunately, there's no crime of domestic violence in Maryland, so that makes it a little tough, but it was just showing you an example of kind of how you could take all of that robust court data and then really drill it down to a case level, even to the specific crime. If you want to look at, I know, and that's another thing we talked about, and then I'm going to shut up and be open for questions, is trying to figure out suppression counts for this, because when you start to filter the data down to such a low level, you can find one court case in some, rural jurisdiction that got, 95 years for some obscure offense. So we did do some suppression counts in there to kind of take into account some of those where such low number of offenses are showing up. But it's probably a good place to stop. We could geek out on this all day, and I know that we're pressed for time, so I'll leave it open for questions. Or if you want us to go back to a particular page, we can do that too. Okay, Elizabeth has a question. I wouldn't say that they're permitted to withhold it for whatever reason. It's not showing up in their publicly available data. If we requested data specifically from them, maybe they would have it. The other challenge with all of this, and this is where I'm hoping that with our relationship with the courts, while all this was going on, we did not have a unified court system. Now the court system is unified. There's a new system. So I'm hoping that moving forward, we get consistent metrics for all counties. Now, I don't know what that does with the legacy data that we have, but I'm hoping that we can start to get Prince George's County demographic data with everybody else's. We just have to get that MOU with the courts together, and hopefully we can start to get this data more frequently and more complete across all jurisdictions.
Also, I think based on this dashboard, you guys created some, I don't know, like fact sheet or something for specifically audience. I was wondering if you could share it with us, or show the example how you guys tried to make sense of it for a practitioner.
Absolutely. I'm glad we have a little bit of time to go over this. Yeah, this was done. We know that there's a lot of data in here. What we tried to do is we set up, they were just internal, so it's not some large sample size by any means, but we did set up some internal focus groups with some of our team at the SAA that are not as involved in the data world, and wanted them to be like, okay, what do you find interesting from, as you're playing around with the data? What do you find interesting? And we really try to look at that to really try to highlight some key findings from each of the three main pages: the general trends page, the prosecution page, and the sentencing page, so that people could really look and quickly get answers to things. So this is kind of our attempt to do that. So you can see, the large reduction in filings. A lot of that has to do with COVID and the courts being closed. You can easily compare here the number of charges and case outcomes. You can see how violent cases stack up to all cases overall. You can scroll down a little bit, Bree, so we can see the rest of them. How long it's taking to file different cases. Obviously, it takes longer to file cases for violent versus non-violent cases. How does the impact of a plea, how is a plea, being used across by race, things like that. So that was kind of our first page. Let's go to the prosecution page. So you can see prosecution rates have generally increased over a 5-year period. Again, you had a lower number of cases to prosecute during COVID. You can see how those cases have gone by year, the comparisons between violent and non-violent. What are the most commonly, and here we had to look at crimes that had a significant number of cases, but you can see the crimes that have the highest conviction rate. So child pornography cases have the highest conviction rate. We would have never known that without looking at this data. The prosecutors may be able to explain why that is what it is, and then you can see that firearm possession of a minor is a highly convicted case, as well as loaded handgun on person and in vehicle. So that kind of breaks that out. You can kind of see how, not guilty cases. So this is kind of looking at cases that go to trial, are they getting not guilties by race, and then how that compares by gender. So these are just ones that we try to pull out of this. There's really hundreds of different things that you could pull out from the data. These are ones that we just thought would be really relevant. Let's go to the sentencing page again. Let's go to that one real quick. So here you can look at the cases sentenced by following year. So that would be sentenced to at least 1 day of incarceration. You can look at how sentencing trends have changed over time. Not surprisingly, sentences for violent cases are much higher than sentences for nonviolent. So you can see the breakdown there. You can see how the use of a plea, I'm sure it's not surprising, but the data would show, pleading not guilty, the sentence length is way higher than any of the other plea types. We did want to focus on those significant sentences of 50 or more years, so you can see how that's broken down. You can see here, murder first degree by far and away is the most common sentence of 50 or more years. So just different things, different ways. This was just kind of our way of then we tried to do an abbreviated dashboard, and then we took it one step further and tried to do a static one pager to help, the public, try to gear towards what some of the significant findings are. And maybe once this is live, they're going to uncover other aspects that we just never thought to include. If they want to drill down to a particular jurisdiction or a particular crime category that, just one jurisdiction just by far and away convicts more than any other jurisdiction. Like we've tried to explore this, but there's you could really spend hours and hours clicking on all this stuff. So we're really interested in once this is live to find out, what the users are seeing. It's a really good question by Janice. Let me make sure I'm not missing any questions above that. Yeah. So Janice asked, do you do any beta testing with users that might not be data savvy before you release dashboards, just to ensure that the information folks are looking for easily accessible information? So this is of all the dashboards we have, and we're excited because we just relaunched our dashboard page probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago. This is by far the most robust of any of the dashboards that we're planning to make public. So we did do focus groups internally for those non-data savvy people, the non-data nerds. So we got some of their feedback. We've presented to the judges on this, to the prosecutors. We've presented to the governor's communications office. We also are working on an internal process that we're still ironing out for our entire office for when a dashboard goes public. So we want to have a review team, like we have our legal team in the office. They review it before it goes out. And we try to give people, like we just give it out to people and say, try to break this. Like we want them to click on different things and make sure that there's no anomalies with the data. So we do our best. We know that this is a unique case because this is our most robust. So maybe we'll get some feedback that if it's way too complicated for the user, then we can always go back and maybe make some tweaks to it. But this will be a good test study because I can't imagine that we're going to be putting out at least any time in the next year or so anything that's got a greater amount of data than what this one has based on the other dashboards that we have. But that's a really good question, and it's really important because if they don't understand it, they can't get the use out of it that was intended. Then it's really not serving its purpose. Like we love building these dashboards. Brianna is built all this from scratch and really loves building these dashboards. What we want them to be useful at the end of the day. We don't want it to just be there to look pretty. We want it to have a lot of value for the public.
So from all these focus group and the conversation that you had with non-researcher or non-people like who are not data savvy, is there any like emerging theme that you think it could be useful to other SACs to know about it? It's just like, oh, as a researcher, we never thought about it, but it's interesting to know, and it might help other SACs to know about it.
Well, I think the important thing, and we brush it over pretty quickly, but we think the user guide and the methodology pages are really helpful. We've really started to do landing pages for a lot of our dashboards. I feel like this one needs it more than any other just because of the amount of data, but I think that that's important. You know, some people are just going to go in and start clicking away, but we want to have these options here just so it just helps people navigate better, through all that's there. We're not going to have like 5 content areas and 4 resource pages and 3 one pages for all of our other dashboards, but we found that landing pages are helpful. The data got the methodology is helpful to define everything. So that's just, you got to make sure that they understand what they're looking at. Even on some of our dashboards, we didn't really hover over them, but we have a lot of infographics, so you can hover over them to get more information. Just it could be overkill. Like we may add this definition on 3 different pages, but it's good to always have that easily accessible so the end user knows what they're looking at. So that's kind of how we've kind of explored, is that we're really starting to move to landing pages for a lot of our dashboards, especially those that have more than 1 page of viewable data. Anything else you want to add to that question, Brianna? I'm kind of hijacking the questions here.
You're good. Only thing I can think of is anytime we receive feedback from anyone that was geared towards how we can make things more user-friendly, we just tried to adapt it as best as we could to that new feedback that was received. So it could have been things like changing the order of how information was presented, because it may be the case that someone has something that's multiple sentences, but they're only going to read the first one. So you want to make sure like the most important part is put out the first part, just in case, and to try and make things as accessible and the least amount of digging required in order for them to get answers to different questions, to make it so that they have the easiest experience when using it.
I'm really curious offline if any other SACs would be willing to share information. Our last finishing touch on this, like we've made little minor tweaks every time we go in here. There's something else that we could find that we'd like to change, even if it's minor, but we are, because of the amount of data, sometimes it does take a long time to refresh or click down on the slicers. We're really trying to explore different ways to get the loading times to go a little bit faster. So if there's any of you Power BI experts on the call, if you have any experience with this amount of data, 40 million rows, and you've been able to have it, you're working with quick load times, if there's any stuff you could share offline, we'd be greatly appreciated. We feel like it's we have a lot of different relationship tabs where we might have 10 different files feeding in, and we feel like every relationship you add, it adds a little bit of extra layer of loading time. But if there's any feedback that anybody wants to share offline, that's kind of the last missing piece to this before it goes live, is we just don't want it to take 2 minutes for it to load for somebody that's clicking on different things. So any feedback there would be greatly appreciated offline, if anybody else has any experience with shortening load times on dashboards. And if any, I know that this is going to go live in the next couple of weeks, but we're happy to share. We just ask that you keep it internally among your SACs, but we're happy to share a password protected page. So you have some time, if you'd like to play around with it more, give you some ideas about how you might want to look at your own court data, assuming that you have, easy access to court data. We'd be happy to share that along, so we can get that over to Jason and he can forward that to everybody.
And that can also be providing an update when the dashboard's available online. I saw that question come into the chat. I don't think we have an anticipated date at this time, but we can share the news when this dashboard's available and when the human trafficking dashboard is available.
Yeah, great. That's what I was just going to ask. If you guys could share that with us, we can help get that out to everybody.
No, that would be great. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks. Well, this looks great. Thank you very much, Jeffrey and Brianna, for sharing this with everybody. It's job well done, and we appreciate your time. All right, I guess we're about done here, folks. I don't see any other questions. So if you could please just take the brief survey when we close, we'd appreciate it so we can meet our reporting requirements. All right. Thank you very much and have a good afternoon.
Thank you all
Thank
for
you.
your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks again, Jeff. That was great. And Jeff, Brianna, thank you.